Well, the Albanese government has stared down the unions in an attempt to win support for AUKUS after a fiery national conference debate. Here was the Prime Minister today.
Nuclear-powered submarines are what Australia needs in the future. Submarines whose importance in our defence capability as an island continent will grow over time. Importantly, the submarines will be an Australian sovereign capability commanded by the Royal Australian Army and sustained by Australian workers in Australian shipyards.
Well, let's bring in National Senate Leader Bridget McKenzie now. Bridget, the government outlined how China will have 200 nuclear-powered submarines by the end of the decade. But even though they got this up today, there's still a number of left-affiliated Labor members and unions who aren't happy with this AUKUS pact. Is this really the end of the matter?
Oh, look, Caleb, I'm just listening to that quote from the Prime Minister. I just couldn't believe I was listening to the young left-wing firebrand Anthony Albanese. I bet he never thought he'd be ever standing up at a Labor conference saying something like that. We know the coalition negotiated the AUKUS deal. It's a great legacy of our government. But we also know for the left of Labor, they can't stand the US alliance and they are very, very much opposed to nuclear power generation anywhere near our country. Now, for them to swallow and sacrifice their beliefs as a faction for the future promise of having their own factional leader from the left wing in the powerful position as our nation's Prime Minister was what happened on the floor of the Labor conference today. The backroom deal got done, but there will be a quid pro quo because that's how these things work. And I think there's a lot more to come in this story. But I'm glad that the AUKUS legacy will continue. It's incredibly important to our nation's security and sovereignty over decades to come, but at what cost, I would ask.
Now, Stuart Wood KC, he's one of the country's top barristers. He's warned today that the wording of the Voice to Parliament referendum question could lead to it being challenged in court. Now, the question that Australians will be asked to vote yes or no to later this year is a proposed law to alter the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve this proposed alteration? Now, Mr Wood says the question is actually misleading because it doesn't actually explain the function of the voice, which opens it up to some kind of High Court challenge either before the referendum or potentially after it if it were to pass. Do you think this is a bit of a problem for the government?
No. Caleb, it's just another problem in a litany of problems, in a whole truckload of problems. I mean, every single day, it doesn't matter whether it's The Guardian, The Australian, The Fin Review, The Age, The Herald, like every single day, this government wakes up to a new problem with Anthony Albanese's vanity project being The Voice. I just, in him pursuing this legacy in a time frame that Karma Langton didn't agree to, for his own selfish reasons. He's actually set back the cause of reconciliation in this country decades. If it had have just been a simple recognition question, 95% of Australians would be on board with that. And I think King's Counsel Wood and others have raised incredibly serious concerns that we need to heed. I mean, the fact that The Voice can be open to challenge in the High Court because they haven't bothered to go to its functionality. Remember, that's all going to be worked out afterwards by Parliament and can be changed at any given time. It's just incredible. It just shows how ill thought through this proposal and its timeline have been.
Yeah,
and
well, Albanese
Caleb,
wants to be Whitlam 2.0.
The people that are going to miss out.
I think he'll end up being Whitlam at the end of his term as opposed to Whitlam at the start. Now, we've only got a minute left here, Bridget, but Labor's planning to replicate...
Oh, we tried to be Bob Hawke on the public holiday.
We don't need to go there. He jinxed it. Albo wants to replicate Biden's centrepiece Inflation Reduction Act. So over there, that's $4.5 trillion worth of investments into renewable energy. It's been passed at the ALP conference today that they'll do something similar with a guide of 2 to 3% of GDP. Now, Australia's GDP is currently 1.2 $1.675 trillion. So by my calculations, that makes it about $50 billion that we're meant to be spending on renewable energy. We've only got 20 seconds, but seriously, $50 billion. And you know who's going to pay for it? Us.
Absolutely, Caleb. Couldn't agree more. 2 points on that. At least the US have nuclear to assist them in low transmission, zero energy production. And indeed, I don't want to be the worldwide experiment on renewables, which is exactly where Chris Bowen is taking us.